What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick.
I'm Jammin John.
And we have an album review for you, and one that's been possibly anticipated. I don't know. I feel like there's been a lot of hype around this band for some very obvious reasons that we're going to go over. We are going to go over the self-titled debut from the band Vended. This comes out on the 20th of September on... I don't know. I think it might be self-released. I don't know. We'll get into that in a bit. This band formed in 2018 in Des Moines, Iowa. This, again, is their debut album. They do have one other EP, What Is It / Kill It. That came out in 2021, and probably the biggest reason we are talking about this band is the fact that two of the members are sons of two of the members of Slipknot. The frontman of this band is one Griffin Taylor, son of Corey Taylor, and the drummer of this band is one Simon Crahan, son of Sean Clown Crahan. And honestly, this is kind of like the biggest reason why we are talking about this band, because this is essentially next-gen Slipknot, I guess, even though current Slipknot seems to be doing just fine. But yeah, this one kind of came up on the list, and I kind of wanted to check it out, even though I kind of knew full well what it was going to sound like.
I'm pretty much in the same boat. I thought I would give it a day in court, given as it's kids that want to start a band, regardless of who your parents are. You know, you want to get out there and do your own thing, so I thought I would try it out.
Yeah, and I mean, color me not surprised at all. This sounds a lot like Slipknot. Not really a bad thing, but I mean, across the board, there are Slipknot-isms scattered all over the place.
Everywhere.
Right down to the intro, which sounds like the intro of the self-titled, the intro on Iowa.
For sure.
Yeah, it's just noise, and there's some muttering in the background, and then the first actual song, Paint the Skin, which is definitely a practice that this band participates in, kicks off with actually some seriously nasty riffs, tremolos, blast beats. There's hints of death metal scattered all throughout this. But if we're being honest, that's something that you could say about Slipknot too. And believe me, the comparisons are going to be frequent.
Baseline, as far as their sound is concerned, obviously there's a comparison to Slipknot, but it definitely sounds like the more angry era of Slipknot. So the first record, there's definite huge nods to Iowa. Drum-wise, I would compare Simon to the Jay Weinberg era of Slipknot. He's not quite Joey, but like the drum work is quite solid. Production-wise, I mean, it definitely sounds like Iowa. Again, that snare drum has a nice thwack to it. The kick drums sound a little bit clicky, kind of like Joey's did. And even the guitar tone got a little bit of a crunch to it. Again, almost kind of shares the same guitar tone as Iowa did.
Yeah, it's got like a little bit of murk on it. In terms of how everything is separated out, I mean, yeah, it sounds like Iowa, albeit like less cluttered because this band doesn't have two extra percussionists, a DJ, and a sampler, even though there's still a fair amount of atmosphere on here. Outside of Slipknot, there's a lot of bands that I could compare this to in terms of like some of like the later nu metal bands, like ones towards the end of nu metal's big run. You know, Mudvayne for sure, Down the Sun. If anyone remembers this band, Twisted Method, I saw them at Ozfest, and I mean, they kind of share like a similar thing here where the frontman of that band was the brother of the guitarist in Mudvayne. So, you know, a little bit of nepotism there, and we're going to probably get into that subject a little bit here.
Early Chimera, a little bit of Soulfly, like it's definitely all over the, I guess, ending spectrum of the nu metal era.
But it does open up pretty strongly. Paint the Skin and The Far Side both are absolutely just vicious songs. And they're not just explicitly nu metal, like they don't just kind of take that, you know, same kind of Korn bounce, or in this case, kind of a Slipknot bounce, and kind of rock it out. There's, you know, interesting transitions, crazy drum patterns. You know, the riffs are decidedly more creative. And Griffin, all right, he sounds a lot like his dad. Like, it's pretty crazy. But he does have like a slightly lower timbre to his voice in terms of his growls. But when it comes down to his intonation, his cadences, just the overall patterns of his vocals and where they land in songs, baseline Griffin is a chip right off the Corey block. And it kind of makes sense. I mean, yeah, you know, kids, yeah, they look like their parents. Occasionally they sound like them. This feels maybe a little too focused on sounding like that, but I can kind of understand it.
I mean, Corey isn't a bad person to emulate for this matter. I like Corey Taylor's vocals, and he does a great job in delivery, both in singing and growling and whatnot. Griffin does wear his dad on his sleeve. It's all over here, and it's really hard not to do that. But to his credit, I will say that, once again, he has picked the angrier side of his dad. There are definite sing-song choruses in here. The Far Side, Serenity, Nihilism, they're definitely there, but it's not like it's a full emulation of that.
His angry delivery does propel this, and I mean... Again, the hallmarks of Slipknot are all over here, like the Slipknot stomping rhythms that, I mean, are all over the first two Slipknot albums. And honestly, well, I mean, kind of across Slipknot's entire discography. But he captures the rage really well. And even, you know, when it comes down to the lyrics, they definitely have an air of Corey. There's a lot of just, fuck you, fuck this, other things fucked, you know, just Corey-style lyrics. You know, they're very angry, but then when it comes down to the cleaner, more vulnerable choruses, it's like, oh, all right, he's got a softer side. But I think this band is probably at their best when they are heavier, because I think their heavier songs, they branch out a little bit more than some of the more accessible ones. Like, I don't really consider a lot of these songs like super radio friendly, accessible. A lot of them do have a harder, snarlier edge, even in the more melodic moments, but the heavier songs stand out for being just punishingly heavy, like Pitiful. Pitiful is a particularly strong track, notably a little bit more groove laid in, big old beefy riff that carries it. The vocals stay harsh throughout. There's, you know, good death metal tremolos and just solid breakdown grooves. Like, it's just a straight up headbanging song that, you know, maybe is a little bit more towards like, I don't know, like early Lamb of God.
Yeah.
But, you know, it captures like a good raw ferocity that, you know, I think definitely shows up on here, you know, throughout the album. But this one feels like really more just kind of focused on just being a blistering song.
Downfall's the same way too, albeit that song is a little bit short. It definitely harkens towards Slipknot's Eeyore vibe, right on down to the drum solo. But that song has, again, death metal tremolos. It's very intense. It keeps moving. You only get 1:55 to play with, but it does it well.
A lot of this album has that sort of like, I don't know, angsty, kind of like loose feel. Like, I wouldn't call it sloppy, but it's not 100% like super precise. It's that sort of like just, you know, angry teenager energy where you're just like kind of throwing shit in your room and you don't know what you're doing. You know, you're pissed off your parents. You know you're doing that. But it's not necessarily focused. It's just angry as hell. And they make good use of that energy throughout this, I would say. That being said, with all the rage and explosiveness and all that on here, it does suffer from some glaring issues. Again, it sounds so much like Slipknot to the point where it's kind of hard to distinguish the two. I mean, the thing you probably notice the most is, hey, I haven't heard a DJ scratching or a weird sample or like a bunch of extra percussion here yet, but everything else sounds the same. And this album does have like moments where I feel like their sound comes out, but most of this I feel is kind of like cast-offs from Iowa and the self-titled, to the point where like some of these songs like Disparager, it just sounds like Slipknot. It sounds like a B-side off of Iowa, like down to every single trope that the band has done in the past.
Or Where the Honesty Lies, where the vocal cadence is so Corey, it's even right on down to the Corey laugh. Like, he has the Corey freak out and then he laughs at the end. Like, and you're like, dude, come on.
Yeah, by the time that happened, which is about 2/3 of the way through the album, I had pretty much filled up my Corey Taylor bingo card for this, because Griffin had pretty much done every single thing that Corey is really known for. Clean vocals, his maniacal screams. Serenity has an almost sort of like rapped bridge. Like, it's the Corey rant style vocals.
It's Pulse of the Maggots.
Yeah, it is. Disparager too has the angry whispers, and he's got those, of course, like quivering, I'm so angry, but I explode, you know, Corey vocals. Or these sort of like out of nowhere clean chorus on like the Far Side, which honestly, I think that clean chorus is pretty good. In fact, I think it's probably one of the better ones on here. He does kind of everything that his dad does, and of course I wouldn't blame him, but they don't always land, or sometimes they're not in the right spot. I would say, like, Am I the Only One? I believe that was one of their singles, and while the song overall is definitely like more of a balance between aggressive and melodic. Like there's definitely more notable melodies in the guitars and such, the riffs. It feels like it kind of demands a big clean chorus, but it never really shows up. Like you have some background cleans, but you know, it feels just kind of uneven with it just being growled all the way through. And it's notably more melodic than, well, at least the first two actual tracks.
Or Nihilism, which is notably faster again. It almost kind of shifts into death metal territory, and then it kind of shits the bed and goes back to nu metal. And the vocals during the bridge into the breakdown are kind of dumb too. But it's another Corey moment to shut the fuck up and get inside.
Yeah, I don't know where you're supposed to get inside. Like a van, a car. I think they did a video for that. They might have been wearing masks. Go figure why. But yeah, like that song, it just felt like, well, an Iowa B-side. Like it's just sort of generic. It relies too heavily on that refrain, which it goes on way too long.
Yes.
Like by the end of it was like, you know what? No, I'm not getting inside anything.
I'm not coming with you.
No. And the end of that song in particular really reminded me a lot of Stampin' Ground's Officer Down, which I think is an absolute awesome, like old school metalcore banger. But the riff itself felt really, really close to that. I mean, it's good for a hardcore bounce. There's plenty of hardcore bounces all over here. But one of the big issues is it loses energy as the album goes on. Like there's a couple of moments where it springs back to life, namely Pitiful and Downfall. But as it goes on, it feels more stock. Like it starts to feel, again, way too close to Slipknot. So even the most energetic moments in those songs, it feels like borrowed energy. And that's kind of my main problem with this is this band, it was born in Slipknot's shadow, let's be honest. But it feels as though it's content to be there.
Being in Slipknot's shadow, however, when it falls back, it really kind of falls back into a really, really comfortable area and doesn't dive out of there too much. Songs like Nihilism or Am I the Only One or Disparager or Where the Honesty Lies, like, they're kind of boring and they're really safe. Where the Honesty Lies is probably the most basic song on this album.
I feel like this album is on a creative leash. Like, there are definitely moments on here where they step outside and kind of live up to at least all the hype jobs that I have seen in terms of like publications saying this is wild, frantic, explosive. This kind of has that insane nu metal energy of a band like Tala. And Tala is kind of a comparison, even though I'm not like the biggest fan of that band. They do kind of make good on that whole frantic energy. Like that band sounds absolutely bonkers. This sounds restrained. Like it sounds like there are points where it could go off the rails and maybe even like, you know, dive into like some grindy fits or like hardcore moments. But it kind of like reels itself back in, or it's already run the length of chain on the leash and it has to come back because, I don't know, like there's a comfort zone again. Like it's safer.
The shadow that they live in is a big one. The Slipknot shadow is huge. But I don't know, if I was a young kid in a band, I'd want to get out from under that shadow and kind of be my own person and have my own sound.
I suppose, but I mean, even on the other side of that argument, like this band with this sound already kind of has like a built-in possible fan base, because if you already like Slipknot, there are definitely enough familiar elements on here that you have a good chance of liking this too. Like there's a couple of songs in here, like if you did a Slipknot playlist and kind of peppered in a couple of Vended songs, I don't think anyone's going to know the wiser. And I gotta say, the end of the album is just sort of an odd collection of songs. Like Where the Honesty Lies, while I'm not like the biggest fan of it, it is an actual full-on song. It sounds complete. It does sound like it could have closed out the album. But then you get 3 really short tracks in a row. Downfall being probably the biggest standout. It's, you know, probably one of the most aggressive songs through and through. It is a little bit short, but it has some like fun, loose moments, like the whole "fuck you" transition with the little extra percussion. Yeah, no, that was kind of fun. The drum solo is pretty badass. But that run of songs is kicked off with a weird interlude type track called Ones, where it's just atmospheric guitars and kind of like wailing vocals in the background, and you kind of constantly get this big fade in of a heavy guitar. Like, all right, is it gonna kick in with something slow and ominous sounding? And it kind of just hangs there. And then Downfall comes in and it's just explosive right away. And then Downfall ends and kind of curtails into As We Know It. which feels like that's what should have opened the album.
Yes.
It's a build-up, and it's a build-up to literally nothing. Like, it's got this good, like, welling of energy. It's got a good plotting, kind of heavy rhythm to it. The riffs are chunky. It sounds, again, like a welling of energy. And then it just stops. And I was like, well, that is the end of the album. Why? Like, you could have got rid of that entire intro in the beginning and put that at the beginning and probably found some clever way to, you know, transition that into Paint the Skin. And I think this probably would have had a more impactful opening. But I'll be honest, the opening of this album, you know, the first 2 tracks that are on here are probably some of the strongest material on here. The rest of this, again, it's very, very familiar, and it really doesn't seem like it expresses any desire to, I don't know, like, get out from the Slipknot shadow, which I can get being under that shadow. Like, yeah, no, that's one of the, you know, biggest metal bands on the planet. But at the same time, I really don't have any reason to go back to this album when I can just put on, you know, Iowa or the self-titled or quite possibly any Slipknot album. So overall, I'm going to give this 2.5 stars. Bordering on a 2, but I do still think that there's, like, some decent songs on here. The band, I mean, they clearly are decent musicians. It's just, there's an air of comfortability in here that I'm uncomfortable with. Yeah, it just sounds too much like Slipknot. Like, there's really not much of a separate identity here other than the fact they're not all wearing masks. It's just a lot of blue face paint. I don't know why they like the color blue. Whatever. The moments of death metal are nice. It kind of breaks up a little bit, but it does go to the nu metal well pretty often, which was kind of to be expected. But, I mean, for the most part, I think it does it competently. It's just not terribly interesting, especially when I think I've heard a good chunk of this before from their parents, or at least 2 of these guys' parents. I don't know the other guys' parents, but, you know, I'm sure they're good people. They're from Iowa. It's, you know, we're Midwest folk. We're just kind of boring. I will say I would be curious to hear what they do on a second album, you know, just to see if they kind of, you know, branch out a little bit. But, you know, this overall, I mean, if you're a big fan of Slipknot, you'll probably dig this. I'd also say, again, like Mudvayne, Down the Sun, Tala to some degree. Either way, check it out. Form your own opinions. Who knows? You might really dig this. I just thought it was okay.
I'm sitting at a 2. I mean, it's Slipknot light. I hate to say that because I know that these guys probably want to have their own identity, but they don't have their own identity in this album. There are moments, I think, where they come out and actually live up to the hype, especially in the first couple songs. The musicianship is decent. I'm not going to knock him on that. Griffin, while he sounds like his dad, he does it really well. The drum work on here is pretty goddamn good. The riff work is pretty good too, even though it is Slipknot light. There are definite points in this album where you could make direct comparisons to Slipknot songs. Not only in the structure, not only in the vocal cadences, but even the actual sound or melody of the riffs. Like, it's okay, but unfortunately it's also everything I thought it was going to be, and I was hoping to be wrong. And I, again, will admit that in the first couple songs I thought that maybe it was going to have its own identity, but it really doesn't. Much like Nick, I don't know if I'm going to go back to this when I could just simply put on Iowa. If you like Slipknot and early Mudvayne and early Chimera and early Soulfly, you're probably going to dig this. I don't know. Once again, check it out for yourself. Who the hell are we?
Well, I mean, we're just asking questions, and honestly, I mean, one of the big ones is, would we be talking about this band if, you know, there wasn't this metal nepotism thing kind of going on here? And I'm not saying that they're, like, bad musicians or anything, but I am saying that I don't know if we'd be talking about this band if it wasn't because 2 of the members are sons of 2 very prominent members of a very, very prominent band.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, it is kind of like a nepotism argument there. I mean, we'd see it in Hollywood, we see it in music too. Like, and sometimes the apples don't fall far from the tree. Like, I mean, dude, Wallflowers versus, you know, Bob Dylan, it's pretty damn similar. You know, occasionally you get some ones that are different out there, but generally, yeah, it does kind of land a little bit close. But still, again, check it out, forming opinions. Who knows, you might really like it. Either way, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there. It is also in our channel up in the banner in the bottom right-hand corner. But if you're looking for Thralls Metal stuff, you have to go to thrallsmetal.com. We have t-shirts, both old and new. The old ones are discounted, provided we have your size. And we even have hats, too. So if you're looking for any of that stuff, click the link down below.
And as always, tons of stuff going on at Thralls of Metal, album reviews, discography rankings, discussion panels, multiple segments, Nick's never-ending collection updates. Just always something to do, metal-related, because that's who we are here at Thralls of Metal. And we couldn't do it without you guys. We appreciate all of our family, our friends, our subscribers. Thank you guys for keeping this channel alive and moving and continually growing. We appreciate you.
Yeah, you guys absolutely rule, and we're looking forward to overloading you with more content. So one more big thank you because of all your awesomeness, and we'll catch you later.